The mysterious pulse of the Nile. The Nile stretched before them like a sleeping god, wide and silent beneath the blush of morning. Dr. Lena Farouk stood at the river's edge, her boots sinking into the wet silt, eyes fixed on the slow-moving current. She had returned to Egypt not to find answers, but to ask the questions no one else dared to voice. Beside her, Professor James Alton, a seasoned British geophysicist with a penchant for lost cities, adjusted the straps on his sonar rig. "You really believe something's down there?" he asked, nodding toward the water. "I don't believe," Lena replied, tightening her scarf against the breeze. "I know." Her father had believed, too. 20 years earlier, Dr. Rashid Farouk had disappeared while surveying a forgotten stretch of the Nile near the delta. His final journal, recovered weeks later from an abandoned tent, spoke of an anomaly buried beneath the riverbed. Something he called the Line of Thonis. Most dismissed it as a product of obsession, a grieving man seeing shapes in silt. But Lena had never forgotten. Alton powered up the equipment, its pulse echoing softly as sonar rippled beneath the surface. "If this turns out to be a sandbank," he muttered, "I'm going to be very annoyed." Lena didn't answer. Her gaze was locked on the screen as images slowly sharpened. At first, just static. Then, lines. Angular patterns. A perfect circle. Not natural. "Pause the sweep," she said sharply. The shapes on the monitor didn't belong in nature. Straight walls. Foundations. A structure submerged in silence. Lena's breath caught. This wasn't just confirmation. This was contact. Alton leaned in, stunned. "What is that?" "I think," she hesitated, remembering a passage from her father's notes. "A ringed court, older than any stone of Thebes, lost beneath the god's breath." "I think we've found Heracleion," she said. Alton blinked. "The lost city. That's miles from here. Not if the river moved. Not if everything we thought we knew was wrong." They stood together, two dots on the edge of a myth unraveling. The Nile shimmered, innocent in the morning light. But beneath, buried in centuries of silence, something ancient had just stirred. Behind them, the camp radio crackled. Static gave way to a garbled voice. Then clear words, "Incoming report, anomalies detected further south, multiple formations, symmetrical." Lena looked at Alton. Her voice was low, steady. "There's more." The conflict had begun, not with war, but with discovery. The past wasn't finished. It had simply been waiting to be heard. Secrets beneath the surface. June 10, 2001. The date etched itself into Lena's memory like hieroglyphs on stone. That morning, the team lowered the first submersible drone into the Nile's murky depths. The current was unkind, visibility low, but the equipment was calibrated with precision, built for environments like this. Ancient, secretive, resistant. Professor Alton watched the screen flicker, arms folded across his chest. "We're 60 meters downstream from the last site. This was where your father's notes mentioned the collapse," he said. "If there's something here, this is where it sank." Lena nodded, gripping her tablet tightly. She was no longer chasing a theory. She was chasing a ghost. Her father had vanished under similar conditions. Now, she was retracing his path with science and memory as her compass. The drone's camera descended through dark, silty water. Minutes passed before shapes emerged. A broken obelisk. Then a carved plinth, inscribed with half-buried glyphs. Columns, scattered like bones. "Freeze the feed," Lena ordered. There it was. A statue, 8 feet tall, weathered but unmistakable. The crown of Upper Egypt, the serene face of a forgotten god. Not shattered, submerged. Preserved by the Nile's silt, hidden like a secret held too long. Alton let out a low whistle. "It's real." Heracleion, also known as Thonis, had been dismissed for centuries as legend, mentioned only in passing by Herodotus and Strabo. It was said to have sunk beneath the waves sometime in the 8th century AD after a series of earthquakes and rising sea levels. Many believed it had been lost entirely to the Mediterranean. But this wasn't the Mediterranean. This was the Nile. Inland. And intact. How could it have ended up here? Alton asked, kneeling beside the monitors. This far from the delta. Lena scrolled through the drone's data logs. Unless the river shifted its course after the collapse. Or the city spanned wider than we thought. They weren't just looking at ruins, they were looking at a lost capital. Trade records from the late dynastic period hinted at a major port near this location. One that controlled the inflow of foreign goods and sacred items. Heracleion wasn't just a myth, it had been a cornerstone of Egypt's power. The central conflict deepened. This wasn't just about discovery. This was about rewriting Egypt's maritime history. Suddenly, the feed glitched. The screen cracked with static, then returned, this time showing something new. Another formation. A stone doorway, half buried. Sealed. Marked with unfamiliar inscriptions. Lena leaned forward, her voice low. That's not in any of the records. Alton turned to her, concern creasing his brow. We need clearance. If we open that... But Lena's eyes were already fixed on the image, her thoughts caught between the past and the present. She whispered, it might be what he was trying to find. The Nile had surrendered a secret. But beneath its surface, something deeper still slept, undisturbed, unclaimed, and possibly dangerous. Echoes of an older world. June 18, 2001. The excavation site buzzed with quiet urgency. Temporary floodlights glowed over the camp, casting long shadows across the equipment. Lena hadn't slept more than 2 hours a night. Neither had Alton. Not since the drone recorded the sealed doorway, uncharted, undisturbed, utterly alien to known Egyptian architecture. By midday, the underwater team confirmed it wasn't a temple. It wasn't a tomb. It was something older. The stone composition didn't match Ptolemaic design. It was denser, darker, and unusually smooth, as if shaped by methods long forgotten. Alton reviewed samples retrieved from a nearby shaft. Volcanic basalt, he muttered, from a source nearly 300 kilometers south. Transported upstream before modern engineering? That's... He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Lena didn't answer. She was staring at the latest sonar scan, an inner chamber, spherical, and shielded by 3 concentric walls. Her father had drawn something similar in the margins of his final journal. A sketch he never explained. A symbol he simply labeled, before dynasties. The deeper they probed, the more out of place the structure felt. Beneath layers of Greek, Roman, and Egyptian relics lay something older, perhaps pre-dynastic. Possibly even prehistoric. We're looking at a city beneath a city, Lena said quietly. Heracleion was built over something ancient. It was a theory few would entertain without ridicule. But the data made it impossible to ignore. Historically, Egypt's pre-dynastic period, before 3100 BC, was considered poorly documented. Scattered pottery, burial pits, crude hieroglyphs. Yet this was architecture. Intentional, purposeful, and precisely buried beneath the Nile's path. Why? The central conflict shifted again. What if the river wasn't nature's boundary, but a design? A veil placed deliberately to protect what should not be found? That evening, Lena sat alone at the edge of the embankment. The Nile, ever unbothered, moved silently past. She remembered her father's words, written shakily near the end of his last entry. The river doesn't drown. It guards. Alton approached, holding a fresh report. The sealed chamber's magnetic resonance is off the charts. It's not just stone down there. Something metallic or composite. We can't identify it. Lena looked up, exhaustion and determination sharing space in her eyes. He was right, James. He was right all along. The professor hesitated. And if it's not meant to be disturbed... She stood, her voice firm. Then it shouldn't have survived the flood. They returned to the control tent as the next dive team prepared to descend. Cameras, stabilizers, oxygen lines. Everything calibrated to breach the threshold below. Tomorrow, they would open the chamber. What they would find inside, neither of them could guess. But one thing was clear. The Nile had not merely swallowed history. It had chosen to protect it. The chamber beneath the Nile. June 19, 2001. Just after sunrise, the dive began. Lena stood by the monitor bank, headset tight, her fingers clenched as the screen flickered to life. The submersible drone descended slowly into the cold grip of the Nile. Water pressure mounted. Silt curled like smoke across the lens. Then, stone. Familiar now. The outer wall of the submerged chamber. Inside the dive pod, Ahmed Zaki, the team's most skilled diver, navigated the narrow corridor. His voice crackled through the comms. Passing the third wall. I see the seal. Looks intact. There's a depression here. Like a locking mechanism. Alton leaned over the console. You're looking at something at least 4,000 years old. Do not force it. I don't need to, Ahmed replied. It's opening. A low groan vibrated through the headset. Stone sliding against stone. Then darkness. The feed cut for a second. Lena held her breath. The screen blinked back. The camera was inside. The chamber was spherical, 6 meters wide, walls engraved with symbols neither Greek nor Egyptian. Not hieroglyphs. Not cuneiform. Circular patterns. Interlocking spirals. A language older than history. In the center stood a stone altar. On it, a black, polished object. Lena stepped closer to the screen. Magnify. It wasn't a relic. It was smooth, seamless, too precise for ancient tools. A sphere, matte black, without seams or scratches. It pulsed faintly, as if responding to the light. Ahmed whispered, "It's humming." "Retrieve nothing," Alton snapped. "Just document and return." But Lena couldn't stop staring. The object seemed to draw her in, though it was hundreds of meters below. Her father's notes came flooding back. He had written of a source, not just of water, but of knowledge. A keeper. A vault. Was this it? Suddenly, the feed began to distort. The camera blurred, light bent unnaturally around the object. Instruments on the surface spiked, radiation, magnetism, temperature, all rising. Ahmed's voice cut through, urgent now. "I'm getting out. The walls, they're vibrating." Static. Then blackness. The team scrambled to recover the pod. 23 minutes later, Ahmed surfaced, alive but shaken. "I didn't touch it," he swore, shivering. "But it felt like it saw me." Lena didn't respond. She was still staring at the blank screen, her mind racing. This wasn't just about Heracleion. It wasn't even about Egypt anymore. Historically, ancient flood myths, from Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica, spoke of knowledge hidden beneath water, of gods who preserved sacred wisdom from a dying age. The Nile, guardian of life, might have been hiding something far older than pharaohs. Something humanity was never meant to find, until now. As night fell, Lena stood by the river, the same spot her father had stood decades before. The current moved on, silent, ancient, indifferent. The chamber remained sealed once more. But the Nile had whispered its secret, and now that it was heard, it could not be unheard.